A 1964 murder in Queens built modern psychology. Almost nothing about it was true. The story that built that field was largely a lie. The science it caused was real anyway. All of that is documented. Here is the case. On the morning of March 27, 1964, the New York Times published a story under a headline that would launch a research field and define a phrase. 37 who saw murder didn't call the police. The story said, a woman named Kitty Genovese was stabbed for over half an hour in front of her apartment building in Kew Gardens, Queens. 38 neighbors watched from their windows. None called the police. 43 years later, 3 psychologists at Lancaster University audited that claim against the actual police records and trial transcripts. What they found is the first thread of this story. What 2 researchers at NYU and Columbia did in the meantime is the second. Both threads end in the same place. Neither ends where you expect. Catherine Susan Genovese was 28. She got off her shift at the bar in Hollis Hills at 3 in the morning, drove her red Fiat home, and parked 30 feet from her door. She lived above a row of shops on Austin Street with a woman named Mary Ann, whose presence the New York Times would erase from the story entirely. She did not make it to the door. The Times said the attack lasted 35 minutes. It said the attacker returned 3 separate times. It said 38 neighbors watched the whole thing from their windows and did nothing. In 2007, Rachel Manning and 2 colleagues pulled the actual case file. There had been 2 attacks, not 3. At least 2 neighbors had picked up the phone. And there was a woman the Times had not mentioned at all, a neighbor named Sophia Farrar, who came down the stairs in the dark and held Kitty Genovese while she died. An iconic event in the history of helping research, Manning wrote in American Psychologist in October 2007, is not supported by the available evidence. The number was wrong. The verb was wrong. The framing was wrong. Sophia Farrar, who actually came down, was not in the Times story at all. Genovese died with 1 neighbor holding her. The Times did not know her name either. And yet, by the time Manning published her audit, the effect that lie had inspired was already one of the most replicated findings in psychology. 4 years after the Times article, 2 social psychologists named Latané and John Darley brought 52 NYU undergraduates into a basement on Washington Square. They put each student alone in a cubicle with an intercom and told them they would be having a group discussion about college life. The discussion was a recording. One of the voices on the intercom was a Confederate. Mid-sentence, the Confederate began to have what sounded like a seizure. Darley and Latané timed how long it took the student in the cubicle to leave the room and report it. The variable they manipulated was simple. Some students believed they were alone with the victim. Some believed there was 1 other listener. Some believed there were 4. The recording was identical. The seizure was identical. The room was identical. Only the perceived audience size changed. Of students who believed they were alone, 85% reported the seizure. Of students who believed 1 other person knew, 62%. Of students who believed 4 others knew, 31%. The presence of an audience cut helping behavior by more than half. They had found what would come to be called the bystander-effect. It has held for 60 years. More than 100 follow-up replications have confirmed it. CCTV footage of real public fights has confirmed it. Wherever you look, more bystanders means less help. Now you know 2 things, and they do not agree. The story the New York Times published in March 1964 was not accurate. The number was inflated. The witnesses had not watched. Sophia Farrar was deleted from the record. The editor who shaped the original story spent his career defending it. The effect that the false story inspired turned out to be real anyway. Darley and Latané built their experiment to explain why 38 people might do nothing. 38 people had not done nothing, but 52 students in a Columbia building did do something close to it. The effect existed. The journalism did not. In 2016, Facebook launched a feature called Live. 2 months later, a man named Antonio Perkins streamed his own fatal shooting in Chicago. The footage kept playing. The viewers kept watching. The effect that began with one fabricated number now had a new audience size. You used the bystander effect this morning. You read an @channel ping in a Slack with 200 people. You did not reply. Tonight, you will scroll past a post that needed an answer. The math is the same math Latané and Darley measured in 1968. It is the math on every street camera since. 60 years ago, the same math had a witness. Genovese died with one neighbor holding her. You did not know her name. A reporter invented 38 witnesses. A field of science built itself on the lie. The effect they were trying to explain was real anyway. Both of those things are true. Neither of them is comfortable. Next week, why your best ideas arrive in the shower. Not at your desk, not on your laptop. In the one place you cannot write them down. The neuroscience of the default mode network. Subscribe.